Evening. It's coming. Salam alaikum and Kaid mi lefolche. There are two ways of saying hello, one in Arabic, one in Irish. I'm half Irish, half Egyptian. I don't speak either language, but I've just exchanged a greeting with you. And tonight I want to talk to you about life's exchanges, and it comes from a lifetime of finding myself in situations where I wonder, now actually sometimes retrospectively, what was going on at the time. I remember recently seeing some racism in a school, and it made me recall that I don't remember any racist incident towards me, though I lived in Nigeria and Kenya for the first 10 years of my life. And I think for a long time I was the only white kid, if I call myself a white kid. I'm more white than black at the moment. And I never felt that I was different or excluded. And I kind of wondered about what was going on and how people saw me and how they thought about me in their midst at that time. I've also started a number of companies, some very small, some quite big. So, you know, 1 or 2 people and then thousands of people in 52 countries. And again, there's lots of exchanges of views and attitudes, and we got value from each other and we didn't get value from each other. And it got me thinking about things. And I worked on a lot of advertising for a lot of different brands, you know, whether it was Coca-Cola or Dunlop or, you know, some sort of feminine hygiene product, as they're so quaintly called. And I found it rather quaint that I was involved in it. But anyway, it made me wonder what was going on. So today I thought I'd talk to you about life's exchanges and to try to figure out what it is, what's the system that we employ, you know, casually or intuitively or implicitly, or maybe even explicitly after tonight. And when I sort of wrote down life's exchanges, I looked at the X for a while, and I rather liked X's, and I don't mean to say that I rather like my X's, I just like X's in general. And the X, if you look at it for long enough and think wildly, perhaps like that early video that we watched of, you know, the natural world, looks a bit like 2 giraffes, doesn't it? You know, the necks intertwining and about to exchange and embrace in their courtship dance. So that's what I'm here to talk about. Having got you excited about courting giraffes, have a look at that. This is the formula that I think explains a great deal of why we exchange value with each other and how we do it. And I thought, to make it a bit easier, I'd sort of spell it out a little bit. So the V is really the start of the phrase. It's if the value of something that I get out of something is greater than the cost that I invest in it, a bit moderated by about how I feel around the world and about the world and my general set of values and prejudices and thoughts about things. So if the value is greater than the cost, moderated by my view of the world, then it's quite likely that I'll do whatever it is that I'm thinking of doing, and I'll have a positive exchange with things. And similarly, and it's pretty simple, if the value looks like it's going to be less than the cost that I'm investing in the thing, I probably just won't bother doing it. So you kind of get a red X. It's all quite simple. So what are these exchanges that I'm talking about anyway? They range really from the fairly trivial to the reasonably profound, and I won't pretend to be able to cover all of that immediately, but here are some things. How did you get here tonight? Some of you probably came by train. Some of you decided you would come by train and then switch at the last moment to the car because it was raining or something. You might have contemplated a helicopter or come on a bicycle. Whatever it was, you'll have been thinking about, how do I get there? That's the value. What are the costs of getting involved in that? And anyway, what do I feel about it? And then you make a decision. You might have bought a car in the last 10 years, like most Britons have. And in doing so, you'll have contemplated which mark, which brand most reflects your character emotionally, or which you're most persuaded to do. Will I go for a 10-year unlimited mileage warranty, or will I go for something that looks pretty groovy, you know, that'll pull people, like some people who work in laboratories near here. And in coming to a TED talk, you might have thought to yourself, what will I get out of this night? You know, it's a Friday evening, it's raining, it's a bit of an effort to get there. Am I going to be inspired? Am I going to be bored? Do I just say that I went to it so that other people think I'm clever or silly, or, what is it? You'll have been thinking about things. Those were 2 giraffes in the corner, by the way, that I didn't mention. It all really revolves around a pretty basic, some would consider it to be an unpleasant and rudimentary fact about most human nature, and that is that we think about what we give, and we think about what we get, and if they're in a sort of comfortable balance, then we go ahead with things, and if it gets out of kilter, you sort of stop doing it. It explains marriage quite well. When you don't get enough out of it and you're putting a lot into it, you tend to want to stop and you think about doing something else. So this notion of kind of quid pro quo underlines quite a lot of what we get up to. And I thought that it needed a bit more exploration, and we needed to start deciding how to value cost and how to cost value. The 2 things needed to be worked out a bit. And so I invented this horrible-looking machine. And this really says that on the left, in the pink thing, think of that as a person, place, or thing. Think of yourself, if you like. Think of a brand. Think of a place that you want to go to. Anyway, it's a thing that exerts power upon us. And it seemed to me that the 2 main sorts of power that are exerted in the world are those of seduction and then those of persuasion. And we're prey to these powers, or we're subject to these powers, we're vulnerable to them, we enjoy them, whichever way you want to see it, before we do a thing, while we're doing a thing, and then after we've done it, we sort of consider, so, I had a one-night stand, was that the right thing to have done? Was I seduced, was I persuaded? I bought a car that was far more expensive than I can afford. Why did I do that? Because I think I can afford it in a year's time, it'll be fine, or just because I had to have it because it's June and it's a convertible. Whatever we do, we kind of think through the seduction and the persuasion of things. And the seduction and the persuasion of things essentially are, when we think with our hearts, seduction, and when we think with our minds, our brains, which is persuasion. It's a little bit like the emotional and rational approaches of old, but I think now kind of made a bit more sophisticated, perhaps made a bit more complex. Let me tell you about that. So seduction, I would argue, really causes want in people. It's desire. I want to do this. I want to have that. I want to be there. I want to be something. And seduction seems to have 3 different main areas. One is personal. Does it appeal to me emotionally what this thing is? Is there a desire about it? Does it create a desire in me? And somehow do I connect to it? I'll give you examples of these in a moment. There's also, socially, how does something work for me? Does it have a special appeal to me? Does it have a sense of vitality, perhaps? You can think of a brand here, actually. If you think of something like Red Bull, whether you've seen a guy jumping out from a balloon at 125,000 feet or riding around on the helmet of, a MotoGP specialist, as is happening in Valencia on Sunday morning when I'll be watching it, there is something about vitality which we find very seductive. It's momentum, it's popularity. And then there's a societal thing. Is the behavior of a brand, Google could be one, Starbucks could be another, Apple could be another, that is somehow decent, fair, and just? Do I find myself attracted or actually repelled by the way that they are acting? So seduction wasn't just as simple as causing desire or thinking with your heart. It seemed to be a number of other things. And if you have desire, if you want something, you tend to then go in this little turmoil, don't you, of thinking why you can. Yes, I want that now, and I can because. It becomes a way of giving yourself permission. And the permission seems to come in 2 ways. In a situational way, where, well, it's so easy to do, I may as well. Now, this isn't really what I feel about banks, but it is true that it's pretty hard to miss a bank. If you want to go and do something with money, it's not hard to find a bank. They make it situationally easy to deal with them. And in contrast, there's sometimes a functional appeal which you just can't resist. This is slightly nerdy, perhaps, but there's a thing called a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a particular sort of high-definition SLR digital camera. You can tell I've got one because I'm going on about it. And it's amazing. If you're going to get into HD SLRs, that's the one to have, and there's really no 2 ways about it. So functionally, you can be drawn and persuaded, and sometimes situationally, you can be persuaded. So it's getting a bit complex, isn't it? You've got seduction and persuasion coming at you, lots of lenses to look at it through, lots of points at which it exerts power on you. But you think, well, that's fine, we've got a formula now. You know, if V is greater than C multiplied by W, then it implies X in a green or red shape. Fantastic. So it should just be able to analyze all our lives, get it together, and not get in the mess anymore. But it's not that easy, because we have a worldview. And the worldview is really just what we are. And we're all different. You know, there's nature, there's nurture, there's the old arguments. And really, it's a lot to do with what values we hold about things. We do things because we believe that we can. And those values seem to come perhaps from our personality, very much from our experience, sometimes just from the social norms that we're surrounded by, and very much by the expectations of the society in which we find ourselves. So it would be nice to say that the formula is just going to be something you plop into anything. You start off your day and say, right, do the formula on whether I should go to work today. You know, and you decide, well, I better go to work today because I need some money, or whatever it is. But actually, this thing gets in the way rather beautifully from a human perspective, because it means that we're not just automatons or robots that can be configured by formulae. But it's helpful. And you can apply these things to really very mundane things. Now, some of my oil industry clients would be horrified, and I hope they don't look at this video, that I'm putting up Shell as an example of a completely mundane choice that we make. So you're driving along in your car. You're either a sort of routinized person that says, every Monday morning, as I go along the A316, I will stop at that petrol station on the left because I've got extra 10 minutes and I'll fill up with petrol today, and in you go. Or you're the type that waits for the little orange light to come on, hope the orange light is still working, and in you go, and you fill yourself up with whatever's there. It's not really much of a decision, is it? I mean, you look at the petrol gauge, you look at the petrol station, you say, right, well, we're matched up, let's go in. So the cost that you're investing isn't great, there's no worldview at play, and the value is that you now have petrol in your car and you can continue. It gets a bit more complicated for some businesses. Ryanair, if you read the Ryanair booklet, which bizarrely you don't have to pay for yet on their planes, it says, we are the world's biggest airline, asterisk, by passengers carried to the most number of, I don't know, locations or something, because they go to lots of small locations in smallish numbers. But anyway, they're a big airline. It's a very big business. But Michael O'Leary, who may or may not amuse you, but he's been doing some strange stuff on Twitter recently and having fun with it, has decided and publicly declared that there is no reason for the airline gratuitously to, as he said, piss us off any longer. So he doesn't think that it's really worth us being irritated all the time. He doesn't think that staff should be irritating people as much as he irritates his staff, perhaps. So in a rather late conversion, he has decided that persuasion, which is really the way Ryanair has worked so strongly, has to be supplemented by seduction. And at least you take away the irritation on your journey to the beginning of seduction. That's interesting. Then you get sort of much more philosophically challenging situations. Let's say you're walking along the street and there's a little beggar girl holding something out for you. And you think, well, I do have some change in my pocket, and change means that it doesn't really count that much to me. And if I gave her a quid or two, she'd probably be delighted, and it'd make a real difference to her day. I might even save something for her, or get her out of the chill for an hour or two. So there the equation works rather nicely. The value I get out of it is a sense of philanthropy and care. The cost is a mere bit of change. My worldview says that I like and care for people, so do it. It's a green X. Get on with it. Unless you're like my father, who was a rather committed socialist, and he used to always stop me even talking to beggar people in many of the places that we lived in the world, because he said that if you give beggars sustenance, you're essentially allowing governments to absolve themselves of responsibility for the care of an impoverished underclass. Is complicated philosophy, but I kind of got his point. It's not your problem. Don't let the government off. Make them pay the beggars better. So, in that case, the value was great. The cost was small, but his worldview really got in the way, and it got a red X. So this equation is an interesting one to work with across a whole pile of different things, and you can see the array of things that you apply it to. I thought just to move on with some particular examples, I'd illustrate how you can think of this pretty simply. We stopped drinking our lattes for a while from Starbucks, didn't we? And I think the reason for that was they seemed to have stopped paying their taxes for a while, and that irritated us. So although it wasn't very expensive, and although we liked their coffees and their slightly grubby sofas to sit on, we thought, nah, not for a while, and we went to Costa. So that was an interesting change where the W became rather stronger than the V and the C in the equation, the value and the cost. Primark. Primark's an interesting one because mostly when you talk to people, they say, can you believe that I got these for £2? And they've been through 3 washes and haven't fallen apart yet. So there's this kind of astonishment that you're getting so much for so little. But behind all that, there's always this little thing that you hear people saying, it's not right. They must be coming, how do they get it so cheap? Who's being exploited? Where do they get the stuff from? And funnily enough, when there was a crisis earlier on this year in Bangladesh, and there was that terrible calamity in a factory where loads of people were killed, it did emerge that Primark were actually leading and had policies already in place whereby people are being paid living wages and they're being treated as well as could be in the circumstances, and I won't go through those whole policies, but there was a sense amongst the population of people buying Primark clothes that actually, if you're going to be buying cheap stuff, you may as well be buying Primarks because they do try to look after people better. What happened? 20% rise in Primark sales. You wouldn't really have predicted that. You might have thought that the guilt would get to people, but actually there's a whole pile of persuasive points made that allowed the emotional continuation of things. Lynx, as we know it here, acts as it's known around the world. Well, did you know that it's the most successful, most popular brand of male deodorant in 120 countries? And do you know why? Because it very simply, even though it says it as a parody, and with its tongue firmly in its cheek, it says, lads, you've got a better chance of pulling if you wear this. And it's that simple. The cost is so low, the worldview doesn't come into it. The value is, I might pull her if I squirt the stuff under my arm, and off you go. And it's not only under your arm that they tell you to squirt it. As you know, clearly. Sky's another interesting one, because it's kind of finely poised, it seems to me. God, it's great, isn't it? They offer us this new way of looking at whatever we want, on whatever screen, wherever we want. That's fantastic. It's unique. It's different. They're way above the rest. They are crap on the phone, though, aren't they? I mean, they're intensely irritating. And they're always in Glasgow. Not that that should be a problem, but they are. Then they put their prices up, and suddenly 80% of people say, you must be kidding. The first chance I have to get out of here, I'm out of here. So you can see that this is a brand ready to be taken by somebody else. Let's move on to people for a little bit. Alex Ferguson. Now, Sir Alex Ferguson, I beg your pardon, is not really liked by very many people. He bullies referees. He's always going on about, extra time, what's in, throwing his chewing gum on the grass when we shouldn't be littering. Why are you chewing gum anyway? At the age of 70, for God's sake. Irritating man. But what did he do? He had this team that went on and on and on, achieved things way above, apparently, their capability. And that is an astonishing feat. How does he do it? Well, that question, how does he do it, has made his autobiography the best-selling non-fiction book ever. It's bizarre. It's just going out at it does just beat Delia Smith's Cooking, by the way, which is #2 now. So what about some other people? Obama. This is all getting quite dangerous, isn't it? Wait till you see the last one. President Obama came into power with everybody thinking, fantastic. This man has got transparency. He does his BBM stuff with us. He's from a minority community, and finally the world has come to live with, all sorts of colors and all sorts of creeds. And didn't he go to school in Jakarta for a while? And look, he's offering, free care for everybody and all that sort of thing. Fantastic. But the reality is, Guantanamo Bay hasn't shut down, and he hasn't done a whole pile of things, and he just seems to be hostage to the same old stuff that goes on in Congress as every other guy that was there before him. So what's happened? Incredible disappointment, and the lowest ratings he's had since 2009. So, what about Adolf Hitler? You will have run to the bottom of the page, and you'll see there's a green X, which is horrific, isn't it? And I suppose my point here is just that this equation, this way of looking at things, allows you, in the proper context, to diagnose why things might have happened. You can look retrospectively, and you can forecast a bit with it as well. At the time, in the late 30s, that Adolf Hitler came to power, there's a huge disenfranchised, miserable, massive class of people in Germany who just saw everything that they'd worked for going to bits. And so they saw this new chap come along and promise a utopian society in a way that had never been articulated before. And it was mesmerizing. It was enormously seductive, and it was enormously persuasive. And at that point, particularly given that they're in such dire straits themselves, the value they got out of it was much greater than the costs that were asked of them and the worldview, because they thought they were right, and they thought that his way was right, and that his way would be right for the world. So bizarrely, in this retrospective thing, you can see that actually they thought it was a good thing to elect him. Of course, it transpired that he was one of the worst things ever to happen for humanity, and it was a tragic event in life. But it is interesting to see that you can understand why people did what they did at the time. Which brings me finally to this question, or this point. The next time you are necking like those giraffes do, just consider, are you being seduced? Have you been persuaded? And put your formula to work. Thank you very much.